Welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining the ProFile webinar today. I'm going to give everyone else a few more minutes to join before we get started. All right, hello everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Javina, and I'm going to be leading the webinar today. We'll be going through the material at a fair pace, so hopefully everyone can follow along. But these webinars are recorded, so in case you miss anything or you need to step away, you can go back to the ProFile webinar calendar and view the recording of any past webinar that you'd like. I'll show you a little bit later on how to get to the ProFile calendar. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started and take a look at what we're going to cover in this session. So we'll make sure, first of all, that you're on the most recent version of ProFile. This is very important to check if you're not in ProFile all the time. Then we'll get into the FX module. So we'll talk about what can be electronically transmitted from the FX module, the required credentials to transmit slips. We'll then get into creating the slips, transmitting the original slips, printing and after filing steps, and then I'll show you how to file amended and canceled slips as well. And then lastly, we'll just go over the Form Explorer feature. There's a lot of information to cover, but we'll also have a question and answer session at the end. Duncan is here with us today, so he'll be answering questions in chat and during the Q&A portion at the end. So just a quick intro before we get started. My name is Javina and I am the digital programs expert here at Intuit. I put together these webinars and I also post short video tutorials over on our YouTube channel as well as our ProFile community. So just to quickly show you, the YouTube channel is called Intuit Accountants Canada. Be sure to subscribe. And the videos that are available on our website, you would go to profile.intuit.ca and then click on the Learn tab, and then under Training you'll see a number of topics and videos linked to those topics that are available to you here. And then to access our webinar calendar, again, you would go to our website, profile.intuit.ca. Again, under the Learn tab, you'll see Webinars and Events. When you click on that, you'll see our webinar calendar for future and past webinars. So you can just register for a past webinar and be able to view the recording right away. All right, so first and foremost, you want to make sure you're on the most recent version of ProFile. If you're following along, you can check for updates by going to the Online tab and down to Check for Updates. If there's an update available, you'll want to save and close any files that you might have open and then follow the prompts to download and install. My ProFile version is already up to date, so I can go ahead and close this. And if you've recently purchased a new license, you can go to the Help tab and down to Manage Licenses. This is where you can go ahead and enter your new license. It's a 6-digit product code and 15-digit license key. This can be found on your invoice that you received after purchasing your ProFile license. And then when you enter the code, you'll see a green check mark that shows that the license has been activated. Okay, so now that we have our license activated and the program is up to date, let's talk about what can be filed electronically using the FX module. If your profile is running its update right now, just go ahead and let that run in the background while we talk about what we can file electronically in the FX module. So on this slide, you can see what slips and forms can and cannot be electronically transmitted. We can transmit T4s, T4A, the NR4, the T5008, the T5018, all original, amended, or canceled slips for the current year. If the prior year slips have not changed on the CRA side, you may be able to transmit them correctly. However, we do recommend paper filing older year slips if you face any issues with transmission. It's important to note here that ProFile builds an XML file of the slips, which you upload to the CRA site. So this year's version of the XML file from ProFile will match the current year CRA requirements. So next year, if the CRA requirements have changed, an older XML file from this year may not be in the same format and can cause issues with transmission. So this is why we recommend paper filing older year slips. The T5, the T5013, the T2202A, releve slips 1, 2, 3, 8, 15, 24, 25, 30, and 31 can all be transmitted as well. And if you need access to this information later, you can go to the ProFile website. So I'll just show you that quickly here. And then you can go down to support and community and support. And you can search here what can be e-filed from ProFile. And you'll see the first article here gives you the information, so you can see here per module what can be e-filed and what cannot. So you would go down here to the FX module for this information. Okay, now let's talk about creating an FX return. So I'll show you how to open an FX return in ProFile. Now this may seem pretty basic, but there are a few ways to do it, so I just want to show you this quickly. So the easiest way is from the File tab, you'll go to New and you'll open your FX return. However, you can also open an FX return from a T1 or a T2 return. So I'll just open a brand new T1 return just to show you what it looks like. So you'll right click and right click on the side of the form here and you'll see Create FX. So again, that will open a brand new FX return for you. Similarly, if you do that with a T2, so again, similarly with the T2, you'll right click and you'll see the Create FX option here. And again, that will open a brand new return for you. The benefit of doing this is that ProFile transfers identifying information from the tax return to the information fields on the FX file, so the info page here. So again, just to show you very quickly, let's call this so if we enter some information on our T2 return and then create an FX, you'll see that the legal name, like the business number, information from that return automatically carries forward. So saves you a little bit of time with data entry if you do it this way. Just keep in mind that this is a one-time transfer. So if you change any information on the T2 return, such as a year-end or business name, it won't automatically update on the FX file. Once it's already created, you would have to update the two separately. And also, just a quick note, this feature is only valid or only available for users who have both T1 and FX license or T2 and FX licenses. You won't be able to create the FX file if you don't have the FX license. And then similarly, you can also carry forward from previous year FX. So if you don't have the T2 license and you're only doing FX, you can save some time that way by carrying forward from a previous year. So just to show you that quickly, if you have a 2020 FX, and then what you can do is right click and carry forward. So all the information will carry forward and save you some time with data entry and just reduce any duplicating efforts. Now, before you begin creating slips, you want to make sure your transmitter number has been entered. So to do this, the transmitter number is required for ProFile to build the XML file, which is then submitted to CRA. So to do this, I'll just open it up in ProFile and we can walk through it. So you'll go to the eFile tab and down to Options. This is also where you'll see your CRA eFile number for T1 and T2 returns. But for the transmitter number, you'll need to go down to the T3 FX, click on transmitter here. If you don't have a transmitter number and you're only filing one return, you can use a generic transmitter number, which is MM followed by 6 consecutive zeros. And so basically this will let you create the XML file and upload to the CRA website. If you're filing more than one return, you should acquire your a specific transmitter number from CRA, which is CRA assigned. Now, while you're in this section, you can take a few minutes to fill out your transmitter identification section with your information. You can also add your account number and your web access code. What you enter here will apply to all of your clients. So most accountants will have their own account number and web access code from CRA if they're filing slips for many corporations. So it's easier when it comes to transmitting on the CRA page. But if you leave the account number blank here, when you create the XML file, it will populate the business number that you entered on the info page of the return. So again, doing this just saves you a little bit of time. And then if you're working with Quebec relevé slips, you can enter your Quebec transmitter number just below here in the same window. And this number you would need to contact MRQ to get your assigned number. And then for other information that you need to enter when it comes to filing slips, you can go to Options and down to Environment and then click on the Prepare tab here. And this is just where you can enter additional information as a preparer. If you're a discounter or trustee, the options are here just a few tabs over. Okay, so just to summarize, you can take a screenshot of this if you need for later, but you can use generic transmitter numbers, which are needed to build the XML file. You can leave the account number and web access codes blank under the settings and basically just enter it when you are brought to the CRA website to submit your files. All right, so once you have all of this setup complete, and you're working on a new file, you'll start off by filling out the information here on the returns info page. If the information is copied over from a T1 or T2 return or a carry forward return, you just want to verify the information is still accurate. So the things you want to make sure are filled out are things like the tax year, the fiscal year or the fiscal period. I'm just going to go ahead and fill that out. And then the business number is also very important. So let's put something there. And then the preparer information, if you filled it out under your options environment settings, it will automatically carry forward here. But if you carried forward the return from a previous year or from a T1 or T2 return, and you notice that this isn't accurate, what you can just do is right click anywhere and update preparer information, and my address changed, so I was able to update that. Now, once your info page is filled out, you'll move on to entering data on slips. So you'll open the detail worksheet that corresponds to the slips that you're entering. So for example, if you're entering T4 slip data, you would enter it on the T4 details. It's very similar with the other slips. If you take a look at the T5, again, there's a T5 slip, but there's the detail form is the one you need for your data entry of the slips. So here on the details page, you'll enter the employee's last name, first name, their address, their SIN number, their province of employment, as well as their slip type. So in this case, we're doing the original. If you carried forward this return from last year, all of this information will flow through, all of the employee information. So at this point, what you would do is go through and make sure those employees are still working for that employer. And if you didn't carry forward this from a prior year and you want to save time for next year, make sure that you check off yes under carry forward this slip, so that next year when you carry forward this return for this client, all of this information will be there for you. So now moving down the slip, you'll see that there's blue text and black text. So the black text fields are your data entry fields. The blue text is automatically calculated by ProFile based on what you've entered. So if you enter your own values in the blue text, it will show up red as an override. So if you do that by accident and you want to clear this override, you would just right click on the field and uncheck override. Okay, so just to show you that again, the black text fields are entry fields for income and for any of the values that you need to enter, and then the blue text fields will be automatically calculated by ProFile. And then if you decide to override this, it will show up in red. And to clear the override, you will right click on the field and uncheck the override. Okay, so I'm just going to open another return where I have some data entered on the T4 details, just to show you the flow of data from the details page to the slips and the summary. So here is the return, and then I will go ahead and open the T4 slips. So you'll see that the information has carried forward to these slips, and you can use the scroll bar here at the top to scroll through the different slips. And then the T4 summary takes all the values that you've entered, and as I mentioned earlier, the blue text fields are automatically calculated by ProFile. So you can override some of these amounts on the summary if needed for whatever reason, but on the T4 slip, you'll notice that the green text fields are non-editable, so you won't be able to override these values at all on here. You would have to do that from the T4 details. And this works similarly for T5 slips, as well as the, so the T5 slips, so there's the T5 details, which requires you to do the data entry here. The only thing different is the report code. Report code is O for original, A for amended, C for canceled, and then the recipient type you would select corresponding to the recipient type, or based on who the slip is for. So again, the data flows from the details to the T5 slip, which is non-editable green text, and then flows over to the T5 summary, which is blue text if you need to edit any of the fields, but blue text is calculated from what is entered on the T5 details. And then just another quick note, so you can use the scroll bar here to navigate between different T5 slips, and then you can click in the sidebar here as well. Let me show you on the T4 details because I have the employees filled out. So here again, you can use the scroll bar at the top, or go through the employees on the side here, or click new to create a new T4. If you're creating RL slips, you'll need to indicate Quebec as the province on the info page. So just scroll down to the filing section here. You'll indicate here, instead of Ontario or any other province, you would select Quebec and then activate your Quebec forms. You'll then create your slips and then use the toggle up here. So you'll complete the federal forms and then use the provincial toggle to then create the provincial slip, so the RL forms. This works the same way with the T5 forms. Again, you'll use the provincial toggle and it will open the RL3 slips. And then before filing, just be sure to check for any related audit messages. before filing. And then remember that federal and Quebec slips need to be filed separately. So you will submit the summaries as required. The slip summaries are not sent with the slips. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, so we're going to move on to
Okay, so
transmitting
now
slips
let's move on
in the FX
to
module. So
um,
I'll do a quick overview
transmitting the
first, and then I'll
slips
show you what
in
it looks
the
like
FX
in
module.
ProFile.
Again, if
So
you
when you're
want to
transmitting
screenshot
original
this for later,
slips,
you can
after
go ahead
the
and
slip
do that
details
now,
are complete,
but I will
you'll
show
check
you
the
in
auditor
ProFile what
for
it looks
any
like.
messages that you need to fix, and then the slips are ready to be filed. So there's a transmit slips menu option under the e-file menu in the top toolbar. So you'll select that, and then you'll select the slip that you're trying to file. And then just keep in mind that only one slip type can be filed at a time. And then after that, you'll select your slip type. So whether it's original, amended, or canceled. In this case, we're doing the original slips. So select that, and then you'll click next, and you'll be taken to the CRA page to then transmit your XML file. And then just one thing to note here is that the window interface has changed from previous years, so it will look a little bit different to you, different than what you're used to. But it's just the look that's changed. The filing method remains the same, whereby you still have to upload your XML file to the CRA website.
So once the slips are completed, you'll want to check the auditor for any missing information. I will have a lot of things that are not complete because I haven't fully completed all the slips and the forms yet. But the auditor will show me what missing information I have or anything that I need to correct. So once I've checked through the auditor messages and done my sign-offs, I'm ready to then e-file. So what I can do is go up to the e-file tab and then down to transmit federal slips.
Here you'll select the slip type you're transmitting. And like I mentioned, you can only do one slip at a time, like one slip type, and then this is the data type. So here you would select original, amended, or canceled. I'm going to go ahead and select original. And then you'll know that this is selected because it's turned blue. And if I select the T5, that would be highlighted blue. So again, you can only select one at a time. It won't let me do the two. Then once that is selected, you'll go ahead and click next. And here ProFile will process your data, and it's creating an XML file. So with this new interface, you now have the option here to copy to clipboard. So you're copying the file path, which will make it easier for you to find the file when it comes to uploading the XML to CRA. So on the CRA page here, it's just like before. You have to click agree, and then you enter your account number and web access code, and then upload your XML file to the CRA server. So one thing to note here is when the upload is happening on the CRA server, when it comes to the slips in particular, it doesn't communicate back with ProFile, and so when the upload is complete, and if it's successful, ProFile doesn't know that, and so uh, when you uh, when you get the confirmation on the CRA page, it's important to print the confirmation right away when it comes up, because from what I know, there's no way of going back to that confirmation. So if later you do need to confirm if the slips were transmitted or not, you typically need to call CRA and have them verify if you didn't print that confirmation.
All right, so now I'll just go over some quick things to check if your e-file options are missing. Firstly, if you don't see the e-file option up here to transmit the slips, make sure your profile version is up to date. We talked about that earlier in the webinar. So again, make sure your profile version is up to date for this e-file option to show up. Next, if you see the option and you see that this is the transmit option is not there, one thing to check is go to the info page and under the taxation year section, where it says, are you internet filing the slips? If you have no selected here, you'll notice that under e-file, that transmit option disappears so you don't accidentally e-file it. If you uncheck this and you say you are internet filing them, you can go back to e-file and you'll see that the transmit option is there. Now, if you've gotten this far and you are able to transmit your slips, but you notice that all of these are grayed out, what happens is once you've already e-filed or your file status has changed, it becomes grayed out and then you can't select it any longer, and there's no way for you to transmit. So what you can do is go to your file properties and change that status to something other than e-filed. So work in progress, process, or ready to file, or something like that, something other than e-filed. Go ahead and save that and then go to e-file transmit, and then you'll see that the option is no longer grayed out, and you can then click it and select your data type and then click OK and proceed. Okay, so those are just a few things that you can do and double check to make sure if you're not able to transmit your slips, those are some things that you can verify. All right, so the next thing that we're going to cover today is printing slips and the forms from the FX module. So there's a few different methods of printing from the FX module in ProFile. Under the File menu, you'll see that there are a number of print options. You can print to physical printer, you can print to an email, send it to email, create a PDF, you can print your slips, and there are some setup options as well. And then in your top toolbar, you also have the option to just print one form, the current form that you're on. And this is another way to access your print settings from the toolbar. Okay, so let's just go to Profile and I'll quickly show you that. So if you go to File, Print, here you can select your print sets and then the forms that you want to have printed in each of those sets. You can also change your status. So after printing, you can change the status of this file to printed or completed. This changes the status of the file, not the forms. So if you want to print and then do that e-filing or transmitting of the slips, you won't have to worry about the option being grayed out. You can also access the print setup from down here and set your defaults. So whether you click this here or you go to File, Print Setup, it opens the same window. And then here what you can do is say you want all the forms to be printed to PDF. What you can do is uncheck this, highlight the forms section here, and then down here where you have your printer options, you would select your PDF export. You can change any of your other printing properties from here as well, your page layout. You can go to your properties here for your printer and determine whether you want to print in color or black and white or landscape, etc. So you can basically make those adjustments here. So you don't have to do it every time you print. It will save in your settings. And then the next thing is just printing slips. So printing slips, just opened in my other screen here. So printing your slips, this is just for the corporation that you have open. Whatever you want to print, you can go ahead and select that here. Print slips PDF is just that. So, but it's going to print to your PDF printer. And your print slip setup is basically your settings for slips for any corporation that you go to print afterwards. So here, let's select the T4. You can select any of your slips from these tabs here. And then say you want your summary to print in PDF. Again, you can select that. Here you'll have to unselect the default printer at the top, and then you can go ahead and use this drop down to change the printer. Okay, so my summary now will always print to PDF because I don't need that to print on hard copy anywhere. Okay, and then again, a quick way to print the slips or print forms is using the dialog box, the icon, in the top toolbar here. So if you go ahead and click on the printer, it will bring you to the print setup, the print selection. And the printer with the one here will just print the one form. And you can decide whether you want to print it to PDF or your physical printer. So that's it for printing slips from the FX module. Let's move on to after filing. So after filing confirmation, as I mentioned earlier when we were talking about transmitting the slips, when it comes to slip filing, the CRA does not provide a confirmation number like it does with the T1s and the T2 returns. So when you transmit the slips, it's a good idea to get the confirmation printed at that point. And then similarly, under file properties, we saw that we were able to change the status to e-filed or filed. Basically, I'm trying to say that it doesn't mean that the CRA has received it just because the status of the file has changed, because you saw previously that we were able to change them manually, or even when printing, you can have it set up so that the status changes. So don't rely on that. Always get the confirmation printed from the CRA site. Now, after filing your original slips, you may need to file amended or cancel some slips. So when we were doing this earlier, we saw that ProFile allows you to build an XML file for those amended and canceled slips as well. So to amend or change an amount, first you'll go to the slip. So let's just go back to our T4 details here. and change whatever needs to be changed. So say he's actually making 150,000. Still a lot less for Tom Cruise, but say that I need to change that. So then the next thing you have to do is change the slip type here to amended, because we've already transmitted the original. And then we'll just go to File, Properties, and make sure that the T4 option is work in process or just not e-filed. So work in process, click OK, so that when we go to transmit this, it's not going to be grayed out. So again, we'll click on the slips that we just amended, and then under data type, be sure to check amended here for amended slips. Then when you go ahead and click OK, the amended slips will then build into an XML file. So if you have any other amended slips or any other slips marked as amended, they will be built into this XML file only. For canceling slips, it's similar in terms of you have to change the slip type here to canceled. But in this case, you don't zero out the amounts or delete the information. So you leave the original, whatever you originally submitted, leave those amounts, don't zero it out, but mark the slip type as canceled. And then again, when you go to File, Transmit, you're selecting the data type as canceled. So any canceled slips that you have under this corporation will build into that XML file. I know that was pretty quick. It is pretty straightforward, but if you're looking for more in-depth step-by-step instructions, we do have community articles available. And I showed you how to get to the community earlier on in this webinar. So feel free to look up amended slips or canceled slips FX module using those keywords, and you should be able to find an article that has the steps to walk you through this. If you have any questions about anything we've covered so far, feel free to ask them in the chat and we'll try to get the answers to you as soon as possible. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the Form Explorer. This is just to help you navigate through the modules and get the forms that you need quickly. So Form Explorer works in all the modules, T1, T2FX, etc. You saw me using the search bar at the top, the search bar in the top toolbar here. It's great if you know what form you need. You can quickly type in T4 summary, T4 details, etc., and the form will populate or pull up, and makes it a little bit easier. But when you first open a return, even if it's carried forward, it's not going to have all the forms open that you need. So what I particularly like about this feature is that when you click on the filing cabinet, you can see all the forms that you used in the last year. So let me just open up ProFile again. If we open the filing cabinet, you can see the forms that were used last year, forms that have data entered. Sorry, these are forms that are used in the current year. If you click last year, this tells you forms that were used in the last year. You can see corresponding forms. So for example, if I click T4 here, you can see all the corresponding forms to the T4. There's a T5 option, so you can see again all of the corresponding forms to the T5, as well as the releve slips and forms as well. If you don't know what form you're looking for, you can search for keywords. So you can click on the key option here and then search for if you're looking for partnership forms, you can type in partnership in the top search bar here, and it will show you the partnership forms. So yeah, this is just really helpful when you're looking for forms, whether it's in the T1 or T2 or T3 modules or FX. It's helpful to quickly find the forms, so I just wanted to cover the Form Explorer very quickly. So yeah, that's it for most of the content that we wanted to cover today. If you have any questions, again, feel free to submit them in the chat now if you haven't done so already. In the meantime, I will just quickly go over upcoming webinars. So we will be having more webinars throughout the year. And so if you go again to our website, profile.intuit.ca, click on the Learn tab and down to Webinar and Events, you can see new webinars as well as past webinars. So you can register for the new ones if the topic interests you.
All right, so I'll just hand it over to Mike now to take some time to answer any questions that may have come in the chat. Please feel free to ask your questions now.